Normally, I ask Layla to make it, and that's not true actually. I make coffee. So I either make an AeroPress, so about 17 grams of coffee in the AeroPress, and then inverted method, or I have a Chemex and do pour over, about 35 grams of coffee per person. That's generally my recipe for a pour over.
So, do you have a preference for dark roast, light roast? What's your favorite region?
Well, I have a subscription to Pact, right? So a coffee subscription company, mainly because it delivers coffee to me at work. I have a crappy filter machine at work and if I had to buy coffee from the student union grocery shop, I'd be on really, really terrible coffee. So it's not as wanky as it sounds. I basically get what I'm given, really. That amazing, I don't know how, I think it's amazing, or maybe amazing's overstating it, but there's that thing that apparently if you survey consumers, do focus groups and stuff and say, what kind of coffee do you like? People will say, I want dark, strong, complex coffee, and look at the coffee people actually buy, and it's not that at all. So, we can add advertising as well as marketing and polling to things that are bullshit, to that ever-growing list.
If you are a coffee company and you want us to plug your products, hit us up at the business email. It's down in the description. We are very open to taking people's money. And speaking of money, my name is Thomas O'Mahony. You're very welcome to Beneath the Skin, the show about the history of everything told through the history of tattooing. We're now doing our latest edition on our Ink Master series, and I am joined by my esteemed co-host, the world's most expensive academic, Dr. Matt Lauder.
Yeah, I'm really getting that oil company money, right? Like Shell, and in the spirit of Behind the Bastards, Raytheon are a big supporter of my tattoo history research. They're really funding my lab. They are, it's a very sweet deal, I have to say, Thomas. Several £100,000 a year.
And if you were paying attention to the news recently, Matt was actually the consultant on the Van Gogh soup attack. He consulted with the oil company that sponsors that activist group, and he helped them laser focus the painting that would cause the most controversy. So, we're getting that money. We're getting that bag.
I helped them pick the flavor of soup.
What's your favorite flavor of soup, Matt?
That is a really good question. I am, when it comes to soup, I like a spicy soup. So if I'm making my own soup, something maybe a butternut squash, apple, sweet sour thing. I love a minestrone. I love a chunky soup. What's your favourite soup, Thomas?
I'm a very simple man, and it is potato and leek. Very Irish answer.
Living up to your
lineage.
Your lineage. Your people proudly loves potato soup.
Potatoes. But before we get into the episode, we just have a quick plug to do. Matt's book is out next week. It's out on the 27th. You can pre-order it from any good bookshop, or if you want to support Matt and the show directly, if you subscribe on our Patreon, not only will you get all the great bonus content we do, early episodes, if you subscribe at the £15 tier, you'll actually get a signed copy of the book sent directly to you. So it's cheaper than buying it off Amazon, which already has a discount, and you're directly supporting the show and Matt.
My shipping it to you might be a bit slower than Amazon because I have to get the copies of the book from the publisher and then post it out to you. So if you want the book straight away, maybe buy it directly, or buy your first copy directly and then buy other copies. Buy a copy for your friends through Amazon and then subscribe for your own. But yeah, if you want a signed copy, get on the Patreon. And I imagine it will be within a week or two after the release date. I'll have copies in my own hands that I can then sign and send out to you.
Truth be told, my computer and everything is sitting on a desk made entirely out of copies of Matt's book, and he has taught me how to copy his signature. So you're getting a combined Matt's signature, but done by me when you order it on the Patreon.
Yeah, and in like 50 or 60 years' time, it'll be like those people that collect copies of the White Album, trying to work out which ones have legitimately all 4 signatures by the Beatles and which were all signed by John. So, maybe we'll do a rare signed by Thomas copies of the book.
And if you buy them soon, you'll also get it before Matt makes his pivot to working for The Spectator, so I'm sure it will be worth so much more.
I'm really hoping for the book to be one of those books where I sign so many copies of them that the unsigned copies are worth more money. That happens sometimes with very vain authors.
But also, it will be the second most valuable book released this year, aside from the Liz Truss biography that's coming out in December, which has its production has lasted longer than her premiership.
Yeah. I really did. Anyone get a Liz Truss tattoo? That would be a question, wouldn't it? I suppose. So Liz, we're recording this on the day after
the latest one,
shortest. Yeah, the latest one, our shortest ever serving Prime Minister, 45 days in office. If anyone got a Liz Truss tattoo, I think that would be a real good illustration of the fickleness, or the bad idea of getting a tattoo of a fickle moment in time.
Yes. And moving on from something that is a fickle moment in time to an eternal moment in time, I have caused, once again, permanent mental damage to my co-host and made him watch Ink Master. And Matt, what is the theme for this week's episode of Ink Master?
Well, this week, the theme apparently increasingly tenuous and unconnected from the on-screen action. This week was composition week. Although you're now not just causing psychic damage to me, but you're also causing it to my wife and also now my co-workers. So my friend and colleague, art historian of activist art, Dr. Gavin Grindon, came over because he was crashing over, and he watched Ink Master with us. And the first thing he said when this Flash challenge was revealed was, "That's not what fucking composition means." And it sort of rapidly went downhill from there. It was also the first time. So he, like Layla, is a big aficionado of reality television. He loves particularly also dating shows. So he's kind of au fait with the format in general. And it was really nice to watch someone watch Ink Master for the first time and have the same reactions that I had back in week 1, which is like, what's this got to do with tattooing? This is like Ink Master. We've now coined, Layla, whenever there's a Flash challenge, given, as I said last week, she's thought it was like Neil Buchanan doing Art Attack. Layla says, "This is an Ink Master. This is an Ink Master. This is an Ink Master," in the style of Neil Buchanan saying this is an Art Attack.
I also have to add that the lovely Layla also recorded Matt's reaction live on her phone and sent it to me. And let me tell you, despite the fact she missed the first 10 minutes, that last half an hour of hearing Matt lose his mind is worth gold. Maybe I'll put it on the Patreon for like the £15 tier as well. But so it's composition week, and the structure of this challenge is something that anyone who's familiar with the show has seen before. So each team is given several panes of what I assume is plastic. I don't think they would give them actual glass.
No, I think it was acrylic, right?
Okay,
I'm pretty sure.
You're the art history teacher.
Yeah, well, I'm as I said, I'm a critic, not a maker. Like Layla was like, yeah, that's acrylic. That's quite expensive, apparently. So big budget, no expenses spared in the. Once again, to be, to get back to tattooing for a second. If I wanted to decide a drawing challenge or an art challenge for composition, lay out a sleeve, lay out a back piece, Here's loads of random shit that this person wants in their tattoo. Make that work as a coherent single design. Like, there's lots of interest. Like, composition is a real challenge for tattooing, because you're working in 3 dimensions. You're working on a surface that moves. Like, compositions and great tattooing, like really great tattooing, is always, at least part of what makes great tattooing great, is its composition, particularly at bigger scales. When we're talking about back pieces and sleeves, and also things that are very specific to a body part, like a throat or a head or something, or a hand. So composition's a really important thing for great tattooing. But this ain't it, Chief.
This ain't it.
And also, this ain't it. And again, Gavin watching this was like, we've had half an hour of this program so far. Why have I not seen anyone doing any tattoos?
Welcome to Ink Master.
Welcome to Ink Master. And like, again, the collaborativeness of this is even like the collaboration here makes even less sense than it has done in some of the previous weeks in terms of collaboration, because we'll come to it. One of the teams did make a bit more use of some individualism in the finished piece, but like, Tom, I love tattooing and I'm interested in tattooing. I don't want to watch a program where people paint huge bits of glass. Like, I just don't. The other thing also, as it's probably, I don't know if that's on the recording that Layla sent you, but it's like the scale was massive. Number one, not applicable to tattooing. The human body, by the way, Thomas, is not see-through. So a huge part of this challenge was layering sheets of acrylic in a dimensional cube, basically, to create a 3-dimensional image, which is not composition, right? Really, composition is kind of a arrangement of features on a 2-dimensional plane. Gavin was like, no, what you're talking about here, guys, is perspective. This is a perspective challenge. And yeah, the human body is not see-through. So none of these skills are transferable.
I have a question, a theoretical question. If the Invisible Man got tattooed, would his tattoos be invisible? Or
oh my God,
would he be floating tattoos?
Oh my God, that is a really... Don't different iterations of the Invisible Man vary on the question of whether, like, like underwear, for example, like whether underwear is invisible, or whether the other thing that differs in versions of the Invisible Man is whether like food you consume is visible when it's inside your body or not. I think like that awful Hollow Man film, I seem to remember that was pretty hardcore on no, we're invisible. I don't know. I don't know. That's a really good philosophical question there. It's made me think much more than anything I saw in this episode. What do you think?
I don't know. Like, if it depends philosophically on how you see tattoos. Is it after tattoos are applied, do they become part of your body, or are tattoos an adornment of the skin that are separate from your body? He's showing me a book by Ed Hardy that says "Tattooing the Invisible Man."
Yeah, that was one of Ed Hardy's like first career retrospective catalogue. Is called "Tattooing the Invisible Man." Yeah, so there we go. That was I think so. Probably Ed takes the philosophical stance that sorry, I was talking away from the microphone. Then Ed probably takes the stance that the tattoos would sort of stand alone.
Well,
yeah.
As someone with a PhD in philosophy of the body, we're doing bodies and spaces, people. What do you philosophically do you see the tattoos as, once they are applied, become part of the body, or are they adornment that remains separate from the body?
Oh God, we'd have to do a separate episode on that. I think there was a guy who used to run BMEzine.com called Shannon Larratt. We should put an episode about him, actually. At one point, he was this amazing figure in tattoo and body model history. Anyway, he had loads of tattoos, and he had a chest piece in particular that was this kind of graphic scene. And when he drew pictures of himself, he included some of his tattoos, but not that one. And he described that like some of his tattoos were part of him and some of them were just adornment. So I think you can probably have both. You know, some people also say, and I don't think I agree with this either, but like, you know, oh, the tattoos were always there. It just took the tattooist to reveal them, like that kind of Michelangelo idea or Bernini that
I agree with that. That's my personal philosophy on it.
Yeah, like the sculpture's already within the marble. You know, the spooky castle is already on the panes of acrylic. It just took creepy Jason to reveal it. You know?
Yeah. So I suppose I'm going to end our previous topic before we talk about it. I think of the line from At the Gates' first album, we are blind to worlds inside of us waiting to be born. But anyway, on that point, we are going to talk about
the world's greatest creating living philosophers, At the Gates.
Incredible band. Listen to that first album. Listen to Slaughter of the Soul. I was listening to it the other day. It's what I tested out my new headphones with. So we are once again decidedly pro-wizard. We are bringing back wizards. So do you have the team?
It's been a very pro-wizard series. Well, I've also got some quotes here, right? Which I've wrote down. One, I think was again Ryan Ashley, who can be relied on in this series. I don't think it's her fault. I'm sure the producers tell her to say stuff. This isn't really an attack on her as an individual, just the character she plays on the program. She said composition is everything, which is news to me because like last week I thought that they told us that contrast was everything. So I don't know. We're changing our mind here, people.
It's everything everywhere all at once.
It's everything everywhere all at once. The other thing I wrote down was think. I don't know who said this. Think about basic shapes. This is a skill here. That's what composition is apparently. Yeah. So we have two teams: Gian, Angel, Bob, and Tony, and on the other side, DJ, Anthony, Kate, and CJ. Yeah. So there we go. Those are the two teams. I think both evenly matched teams. I'm trying to read my notes here. Composition is vital, and then I wrote as opposed to what? Like, you know, in this challenge,
both of us have seen some very, very badly composed tattoos. So
this is true, but it's this week in this challenge, composition is vital. Like as opposed to all the other fucking challenges we've had where they haven't given a shit about composition. Apparently, like come on.
But funnily enough, I actually think that you are uniquely qualified in your profession to actually talk about this challenge because it is the most like painterly and artistic, so they have to create perspective using several acrylic paints. And so Bob's team
they again hilariously a direct quote, multiple different compositions, which is again not what composition means.
Yeah, so Bob's team, they are doing, it's kind of like a floating anatomical heart with a, what's the name of the painter? It reminded me so much of a specific painter.
Yeah, it was like Magritte, right?
Yes,
Magritte.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, and another Sacred Heart, right? Once again, our little thesis, give a tattooer a blank bit of paper, they'll do something very generic. Here we get another, I think the third or fourth Sacred Heart of the series.
Yeah. So it's like a sitting room scene inside the heart. There's also like a little detail of there is a mirror on the wall with the scene replicated 2 more times inside the mirror. That's very Magritte. And then there's like kind of sand dunes behind it that create perspective. I thought this was cool. I thought it was a good use of the material, but I think the other team kind of blew them out of the water a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I don't know, like, the temperature in the room in our little group watch was that wasn't super great. It looked, again, completely not having listened to the previous episodes, Gavin went, that looks a bit GCSE, which is a thing that we've said over the past few weeks. Like, I don't know, like, I thought, number one, you know, the heart was backwards. Creepy Jason did point out that the heart was anatomically the wrong way round. And that's the kind of thing that in other challenges have been really nitpicked on by judges. So they ignored it here. I know, I quite enjoyed it graphically.
Also, I need to point out, perspective-wise, the sitting room was at a different perspective angle than the rest of the piece. So it looked really weird if you like actually focus on the viewpoint through the heart to the sitting room scene. It kind of looked like it was kind of squashed or spread out a little bit.
Yeah, I thought. I mean, I don't know how much of that was an artifact of the camera, but I thought that kind of worked, like, in a way. But again, it's not a perspective challenge. The human, like, I don't know. It was all right. Like, it was a nice, fun little piece of visual trickery. Is that the right way of putting it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then we move on to our wizard painting. So they decided to do kind of like, you know, like a cover of a fantasy novel, like a real pulp fantasy novel. There's a castle in the background. There's clouds. There's these weird bubbles as well. You know, I'm going to drop like 3 seconds of Dope Smoker in the fucking episode now. And like, I thought it was, in terms of use of the materials they had, like they were dabbing the acrylic with like cloths to get that real kind of vapory texture in the clouds. The bubbles were like a good, let's just call it perspective rather than composition, because that's what it is. Really good use of like the distance between the panels to create that actual like perspective from front to back. And I thought it was really cool. That's because I'm biased towards wizards, but what did you think?
Your affirmative action for wizards. I wrote down what were the bubbles. That annoyed me.
So like, I think in terms of what they were going for and kind of like mid-century fantasy pulp novels, I feel like kind of goes very well with the existing style. It's, you know, what's Frank something is his name. Think of like all the like heavy metal magazine covers, like stuff like that.
Frank Kozik, do you mean?
And like Mobius. Like think of like the construction sketches for like Jodorowsky's Dune. Like kind of makes sense, like that sort of like, are they magic? Are they part of the atmosphere? That sort of thing. Think of like Conan covers and stuff.
Yeah, that's not Frank Kozik, is it? That's Frank. I'm going to Google it because I can't remember. Frank Kozik is the guy that does loads of like graphic stuff. Frank Frazetta, that's who it is.
Yes. I follow the estate of Frank Frazetta on Instagram, so I should know this. Apologies.
I did. Yeah, I did. I did say that. I did say it looked like. Yeah, it looked like. Which I don't think they actually were by Frank Frazetta, but they were certainly ripped off of Frank Frazetta. He may have done them. The like the box art for the 1980s like He-Man toys.
Yeah.
Were exactly in that. Yeah, and I said that like it looked like a kind of diorama for a He-Man figurine. And I don't mean that necessarily critically. I've got a big He-Man figurine behind me.
Yeah, He-Man. We're watching Ink Master.
You boob. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, again, like, I don't know, I just found it, I'm tired, Tom. I found it really hard to get excited about it because it didn't tell me anything I didn't already know about their artistic ability. The images were fine. I mean, like lots of the tattooing, it's fine. Didn't blow me away. I could, like, even Joel Madden wasn't wearing a good hat. You know, like there wasn't even a good outfit choice in the mix. I just found it really like, you know, like, again, this has been a theme over the course of the past few weeks. I've said I feel like the producers have lost confidence in the format of this program, and I felt like this was really a barrel scrape. Really a barrel scrape in terms of like, what can we do? You know?
Yeah, I fully agree. But like, so it comes out that Team Wizard wins. They get the skull picks.
Who was on Team Wizard?
So that was DJ Anthony, Katie
and Creepy Jason.
Creepy Jason. Jason once again bringing the wizard magic, male witches. But then we moved to the elimination tattoo, which as soon as I saw this, I was like, oh no, Matt needs to up his blood pressure medication in preparation for this. You know, Matt, do you want to tell the people what the elimination challenge is?
Japanese.
I am very surprised they didn't the producers really restrained themselves. I didn't put like a in it or like
well, fucking nearly.
So what did they say about Japanese tattooing?
Well, what was the twist, right? Because of course we've got like not just Japanese, Master of Chaos, guest judge,
surprise judge, and we're going to talk about that later once we get into the tattoo.
Holy fuck, are we going to talk about that? Jesus
Uniquely
Christ, are we going to talk about that?
To judge. They got Horitomo. They got
Horiyoshi the Third.
Yeah, Horiyoshi the Third. So this is Ami James's arena. You know, we've talked about Japanese previously on the show, but Matt, to give people a refresher, I'm giving you exactly 3 minutes to give everyone a rundown of Japanese tattooing. 3 minutes starting in 1, 2, 3, go.
Okay. Well, look, as I said the last time this came up, Ami James has studied the practice of Japanese tattooing way more than I ever have, and I will defer to him on many things. On the history of Japanese tattooing, and particularly Japanese tattooing in relation to other tattoo histories, it's almost worse that he claims to have studied it for so long, because he's so wrong about... I think probably on the recording that you have from Layla, everything he says, I'm like, nope. Nope. So, okay, Japanese tattooing. Gavin said to me, first of all, and this is maybe a really interesting place to start, or hopefully, this is going to be more than 3 minutes, Tom, sorry. Gavin said, this is going to be like last week on Bake Off in the UK, where they did Mexican Week. And everyone was annoyed that they couldn't make tacos in an authentic way. Gavin was like, isn't it a bit weird to call that stuff Japanese tattooing, like naming a style after a place? Like, Japan's a fairly big country. It's obviously been it has an ancient history as well as a modern history. Like, it would be like calling a tradition English tattooing or something, when actually things are more interesting going on. And actually, while he is sort of correct, there's an interesting historical reason for what this show and what we generally call Japanese tattooing is Japanese tattooing. It's basically because Japan had a series of civil wars over the course of the kind of early Middle Ages, right the way through to the kind of 16th century. And that ended up with a homogenization of the country under a kind of unifying rule. And that unification essentially kind of created, or at least, argued for a kind of national homogeneity. There were tattoo traditions in places like Okinawa, where and amongst people like the Ainu, where that kind of tattooing was much more like the kind of indigenous tattooing we see elsewhere in the Pacific. So black, kind of graphic. Very famously, the Ainu women have these smiles tattooed on their faces in big black things. My colleague and friend Yoshimi Yamamoto has written and published a lot about those tattoo traditions, largely in Japanese. Unfortunately, she hasn't had much of her work translated into English, but there is a kind of, tradition of tattooing in Japan that we don't think of when we think about what we call Japanese tattooing. There's been some really interesting, like, projects to reimagine what prehistoric Japanese tattooing might have looked like, called the Jomon Project, which people can Google, Jomon. But that kind of stuff that we think of as like Japanese tattooing today is very recent, historically speaking. It doesn't really exist until the 18th century, so the 1700s.
Yeah, we're talking like talking the Edo period around then.
Basically, yeah, exactly. So it's not this great ancient art form, right? It exists. Really, it comes out of the development of woodblock printing. Woodblock printing and that as a practice in Japanese and Chinese art actually goes back a very, very long way. But when we think about Japanese art, potentially in the West, we're thinking of things like Hokusai and Kuriyoshi and Utagawa, and like they are woodblock printing. That tradition really isn't that old, and tattooing is basically those images coming out of woodblock printing being transferred onto the skin. It was never a mainstream practice, by which I mean, like tattooing in places like New Zealand, places like Fiji, places like, as we spoke to, Maya, the Arctic, where tattooing was part of a kind of religious, social set of rituals or beliefs or social customs. Japanese tattooing is almost much more commercialized, basically. I mean, I'm simplifying a lot here, and we can talk about this in a future episode.
If you're finding this interesting, I'm just going to jump in. We are going to do a 3-part series in the new year about the history of Japan. So
yeah, we should do that. So essentially, that means that even the questions of like appropriation, because Gavin was like, also, isn't it a bit weird that all these white people are doing Japanese or talking about Japanese tattoos? And like, yes, although questions of appropriation are much more complicated in way, or actually perhaps even much more simple when it comes to Japanese art than it does in other contexts, because it doesn't have it's not integrated into a social, religious, metaphysical belief. That's not to say that people's religious beliefs from the religions in Japan, like Shinto and Buddhism, don't feature in the iconography of Japanese tattooing. They certainly do, but it wasn't a kind of mainstream part of their normative cultural practice, right? So it's much less problematic, I have to say, in my opinion, and I'm sure other people will disagree with this, but in my opinion, it's much less problematic to get a Japanese tattoo than it as a white person or as a non-Japanese person than it would be, say, to get a Mori sleeve or a Hawaiian sleeve or something. So okay, so all that said, then we have really where Army James starts going really madly wrong and it made me annoyed. So I think, so he also said this is the most difficult subject matter in the history of the competition, which can't be true. Like, that cannot be. I've only seen one series of Ink Master, but that cannot be true.
I don't think so. Like, they've done Japanese week before. They've done you'll see as we dwindle down to competitors, things get technically more difficult. Like, the scale kind of grows, the intricacy of what's expected of them grows. Not to say that Japanese tattooing isn't extremely intricate, but I think the complexity kind of grows. And I've seen a lot of Ink Master. I've seen almost all of Ink Master, and Japanese week is usually what trips people up. So with that all in mind, we are presented with the human canvases.
Yeah, well, so Army James also says the Japanese were the first to use colour in tattooing. No. I mean, okay, let's be generous. So Japanese tattooing has traditional Japanese tattooing pre the 19th century. So Japan, for those of you who are listening who don't know, was closed off from the West from about 1600 to about 1858. Now, that is like very rough. There was a little bit of trade in and out of Nagasaki, first with the Portuguese, then largely with the Dutch, and a bit with the Chinese. But Japanese people weren't allowed to leave Japan. Foreigners, almost without exception, weren't allowed to enter Japan. Even those that trading port in Nagasaki like had little enclaves for trade to happen, and they couldn't go into the interior of the country. So Japan was like completely isolated from the rest of the world. Their tattoo traditions, therefore, are quite particular. So their Japanese tattooing, big scale Japanese tattooing, sleeves, back pieces, and even smaller stuff, it did include a lot of red. But really only black and red, right? Was basically, or you some of the tattooists whose work we know about did get gradations of tonality within that, but basically we're talking about a kind of tattooing black, so a kind of bluey black, and a red. Now, red tattoo ink has existed as long as black tattoo ink, probably, although again, let's be really generous and steel man Army James's position. Like Japanese tattooing is probably using bigger blocks of solid red than other tattoo traditions. However, all that kind of color that we get in contemporary Japanese tattooing came from Europeans. It was Europeans, and even as late as the middle of the 20th century, that European colored inks that were developed in Europe that were given to or shared with Japanese tattooers when they came to Europe, that they then took back home. So all of the colors, like, almost got the opposite. Like, Japan didn't have colored ink, certainly not in the modern period. It was Europeans who introduced colored inks into Japanese tattooing. Number one. The second thing he says is that they were the first to use outlines, which is like completely meaningless. Obviously, like, what the fuck does that mean? Obviously not true. Like, 17th century pilgrim tattooing was obviously kind of graphic and using outlines. We've got descriptions in the 1700s using outlines. We've got, like, obviously, like, any primitive pre-modern tattoo will have been done. Look at the Scythians, for example, are doing stuff in outline. We talked about Ochibala on a previous episode. Like, this is just not. It's just, I don't know what he means. And actually, again, it's almost like the opposite in a way, because so much, particularly of like black tattooing, or back tattooing or large scale tattooing in Japanese tattoos, is negative space. So it's like the opposite of line work, right? Like those big koi and those big, big compositional pieces, ironically, for this week are done not using outline, but using negative space, the opposite of an outline, I suppose. So, look, I'm not going to quibble on about him. Like, he talks a lot about rules, which frustrates me. He's more hardcore, I think, on that than the tradition really suggests. But I'm not going to argue with him about those details. But when he talks about the history, he's not correct.
Matt Lauder taking shots at the sniper. So, with that in mind, Matt has talked for 14 minutes about...
Was that what it was? Was it?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh, I'm so sorry.
12 minutes and 45 seconds.
Fucking hell. Jesus Christ.
So, with that in mind, let's talk about the human canvases. So, we're presented with all the skulls. People come in. So, here are the canvases in order as they are presented. We have a demon woman in a kimono with horror elements, a full armored samurai with cherry blossoms, a full armored samurai, which is someone's first tattoo.
Yeah.
A Raijun banging a drum. Raijun is the Japanese god of thunder and lightning. A full body foo dog, a dragon, a snake woven through a Hanya mask, a crane in flight with sun and clouds, and a yellow sun, which will become relevant later on, and 4 koi fish plus water plus lotus flowers. So, Matt, What is your first take on these ideas?
Well, okay, so I liked... we said this before. Many of these, we don't hear much about, or sometimes anything from the people and the stories of their tattoos. And again, it was interesting for me that one of these tattoos, the guy who wanted the koi, we got a little bit of We got a little bit of kind of, narrative. We got a little bit of Miami Ink style storytelling about what he thought, the fish would represent. And he was like, yeah, I want the koi, 5 koi to represent my siblings. And I was like, yeah, because kids like fish.
Fish.
Kids like fish.
Yeah.
So that was really annoying because I don't like that kind of thing. Obviously this guy wants a cool tattoo. Why have we got to make up a reason why? Oh yeah, I want 5 fish because I've got 5. Also, that was a really interesting insight because, cutting ahead slightly, Anthony was the one that picked this one or was given this one. And so we got a little bit of insight into Anthony's life. And he was like, yeah, I'm really happy to be doing this meaningful tattoo on this guy because, I also have a particular relationship with my siblings. And I was like, what happened to your son, Anthony? We're still hearing about, we're hearing about your sister. We still don't know. Daddy, when are you coming home? I really want. We've just forgotten. It's like on those 60s and 70s sitcoms in America where they introduce a younger brother. Is it Happy Days or one of those ones where they have a younger sibling for 2 episodes and then they just never mention them again, like Poochie. It's
like
in The Simpsons.
Poochie or Roy. I got my own place. I'm moving in with 2 sexy ladies.
Yeah, right. So I just feel like this is a plot hole. Yeah, the producers. I'm really invested in the slow death Home Alone style movie that must be happening back in Atlanta, Georgia.
Jesus Christ, I'm pro wizard and Matt's pure pro infanticide.
No, I'm worried. I'm worried. You heard our Tattooed Children episode. I'm worried about the fate of Anthony's child more so than he is.
If you're not a subscriber to our Patreon for as little as £5 a month, you can hear that Tattooed Children episode, or you can hear the preview on our free feed. So the assignments are as follows: Demon Woman in a Kimono goes to DJ, Samurai in Armor goes to Bob, the Raijun goes to Tony, Full Body Food Dog goes to Angel, Dragon goes to Katie, the Snake Woven through a Hanyu mask goes to Gian, Crane in Flight with Sun and Clouds goes to Jason, and as we know, because Matt spilled the beans, the koi goes to Anthony.
Yes.
Initial thoughts?
Yeah, they're all very interesting designs. I think they're all pretty, they have got, they're pretty anchored in tradition. I think, as we'll talk about, some of them end up
anchored
looking
in
like
tradition.
they're...
Anchored in tradition. Half of these aren't even Japanese tattoos. I was sitting here looking at this episode and I was screaming at the TV. Half of these are not Japanese tattoos.
Well,
they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of them are some of them, even, some of them are Chinese a bit, but Chinese zodiac and Chinese symbology came into Japan in the 8th century, so I can forgive that a bit.
I'm not even talking about the actual design. I'm talking about the application of these tattoos.
The application. Oh yeah, no, the application was garbage. The application was garbage, Thomas. No, I was talking about the design choices.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about that in 1 second. But while people are tattooing, one Bob is doing the samurai tattoo. It's this guy's first tattoo. He's a very slight, skinny dude getting this huge tattoo on his thigh, which, brave. Anthony manages to talk the guy down from doing 4 or 5 koi and said, we'll do 1, make sure to do it great, and then you can come see me in my shop in Arizona and I can do the rest if you want, which from any tattoo artist I've spoken to.
It's Arizona. It's Arizona that his child's in. Sorry, not Atlanta.
And recently when I was getting tattooed, I was talking to the artist about a larger scale piece he's doing on someone, and he just said, "Yeah, that dude isn't coming back. He's just not coming back." Because I have a tattoo with a sun behind it. I'm showing it right here on camera. So Jason did the exact same thing I anticipated. As soon as this woman said yellow sun, he was like, he's going to change it to a red sun because that's much more traditional in, kind of modern Japanese tattooing in the West. So,
well, even in older stuff, because as I said, traditional Japanese tattooing didn't have yellow ink, did have red ink. So yeah.
So we got to talk about the surprise guest.
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ.
Angel calls her an icon. An icon.
Right. So they do this sometimes on other shows, right? Like bring in guest judges. Like Drag Race, notwithstanding, but like on a cooking show, it's like Japanese week. We're going to bring in a Japanese chef. It's sewing competition or pottery competition. We're going to bring in someone who's an expert. Like Pottery Showdown's a good example of this. Like we're going to do some applique, like transfer wear stuff. We're going to bring in this person that makes applique transfer wear. We're doing like 60s week. We're going to bring in Orla Keeley to do the pots, right? Brilliant. Really up for this. If we're going to judge this on authenticity, we're going to get in a Japanese tattooer. And I stood up and cheered when they introduced the guest judge for some fucking reason. She wasn't even promoting anything. Like, it's not like she had a movie out or anything. Like, why? Ruby fucking Rose, who I've enjoyed her performances. You know, she's a good-looking lady. I have really enjoyed her in her many filmic roles. Her supposed qualifications for being a judge is that she got a really bad Japanese-ish tattoo when she was 17 years old.
Like, literally, like, if only you could, like, I have my head in my hands and I'm screaming into the mic when they showed her koi fish and tiger tattoo. I was like, those are so bad. You should not be showing them when it's Japanese week, and her like talking about Japanese tattooing and everything. I was like, why? This is where well, you could argue that Ink Master jumped the shark a while ago, but like, why? This is like, aside from the episode next week, which I have already watched, this, I was just like, why? Like, you literally have Ami James, who is, by his own right, an incredible Japanese tattooer. Like, this, like, you literally could, well, I suppose you couldn't have flown Horitomo up there to look at it because he probably would have had no interest in being involved in this. But just why? And like, we'll get to her critique in a minute.
There are loads of good Japanese and Japanese American tattooers who are working, you know, who these guys know, who are, you know, like, you know, people like the shops like State of Grace in California. Like, you know, there are loads and loads of great Japanese and Japanese American tattooers who would have been really great judges on this show. I'm sure Ami James knows loads of Japanese tattooers.
Like, literally, Bob is Japanese American. Like, you could have just like, oh, who do you think should come on? Like, I'm just, anyway, aside from her going around saying absolutely nothing while people are doing the tattoos, let's actually talk about the critiques.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't take too many notes on exactly what the judges said because, you know, it just all seems so disconnected. I have thoughts on some of them specifically, like, so Anthony's, for example, his poor starving child notwithstanding, like, looked to me like he got a fairly decent crit, I think, from Army, but it looked like a 90s flash sheet. Like, it looked like one of those kind of Cherry Creek kind of weak ass fine line 90s like revivification of Japanese. Like, we should also talk, I didn't mention this a minute ago, but like Japanese tattooing, you know, obviously comes into, firstly, as we've talked about in other episodes, like inspires the beginning of the industry. So kind of fine line versions of Japanese iconography is a good kind of historical, you know, precedent in European tattooing.
Listen to our Sutherland McDonald episode.
Yeah, this was on the McDonald episode. Then we have like what's happening during World War II, particularly with, you know, sailors who are obviously not in Japan, but where there is kind of, increased cultural contact in the Pacific between American servicemen, Dutch servicemen, etc., and those traditions and those designs, geishas, dragons, in particular, kind of not kaiju, kind of those kind of horror images. They get kind of incorporated into American style tattooing, by people like Sailor Jerry, for example. And then in the 70s, Ed Hardy, tutored by Samuel Stewart, who was an academic who was reading books about Japan, introduced Ed Hardy to Japanese tattooing, and Ed in the 70s kind of really, really brought in, both in reinterpretation and by working very closely with Japanese artists, as we talked to Doug Hardy about, actually, when we interviewed him, brought that into the American tradition. So there are lots of waves of the interaction between Japanese tattooing and American tattooing. And then basically when that kind of 70s wave loses a bit of momentum, again, it's revivified in that moment in the 90s when we start seeing, the resurgence of the Japanese language tattoo and stuff like that kind of Orientalism of the, we can think about things like, no doubt Gwen Stefani's like weird little Japanese period, all of that stuff that kind of, and off the back of that, we ended up with a very weird, kind of weak, kind of very genericized, in a bad way, version of Japanese tattooing. And I think that's what Anthony's looked like, very, very sort of kind of weak line weights. The shading was weird. The water, thank God he didn't put blue water in, but, they're not good, chunky, solid, traditional Japanese waves. Like, yeah, the whole thing just was a bit insipid, but insipid in a way that, I think, again, probably to put my cards on the table, I am really dispossessed to like, or disposed to dislike. I when I was getting into tattooing, that was the stuff that was very cliched and mainstream, and the stuff that I didn't want to get. So, that's part of where my dislike of that stuff comes from. But it was so weak and embarrassing, as far as I was concerned. Although the judges kind of liked it.
So I suppose, because we will have a lot more to say about the ones we didn't like. Who did you like? We'll just like say who we thought was good. I thought Bob's was good. The color was good. The line work was shaky at best. That sword looked like he'd been through 1,000 battles, but whatever. Angel's Food Dog I thought was decent, with good rendition, a little bit light in the shading, a little bit like
not Japanese at all.
Yeah,
in its execution,
I
didn't look like a Japanese tattoo at all.
Yeah, I am going to give Gian shit. Usually I am quite pro Gian. That was not a Japanese tattoo. That was a Neotrad tattoo that had Japanese elements. That was complete and utter bollocks.
Yeah, I didn't hate it that much. I mean, but I agree with you in style wise. I thought, again, like weirdly, because of the way that, again, unlike a lot of other styles, right? Historically speaking, Japanese tattooing is quite influenced by European tattooing as well. Like, it has this much more interestingly symbiotic relationship, as Japanese art did in general for particular historical reasons. So, a lot of that kind of embrace of flat color and stuff goes both ways. I don't know. Like, yeah, I agree with you. It wasn't super trad. I mean, it's funny where Army chooses to critique and apply these sort of so-called unshakable rules, and when he doesn't, very arbitrary.
It's funny. The next two I want to talk about is that it kind of is that flip side of the coin. So like, DJ's Demon Woman Kimono is really good, really good. I don't really have a whole lot to say about that as a tattoo enthusiast. Maybe you do as a historian, but the flip side of Army James's critiques was Tony and Jason. Jason did a crane with a red sun behind it and some clouds. this, like you were saying, feels very 90s contemporary modern Japanese tattooing in the West. Like, feels very, something off a flash sheet.
Yeah, and that's probably okay. I mean, I think, like, as I said, I would have loved to have seen something more like, okay, let's do a Japanese sleeve, let's do a Japanese back piece for composition week. Because again, composition didn't really play any role whatsoever in any of these pieces.
Oh, go on ahead.
Well, Tony's was a mess.
Yeah. Sorry, Tony. Love you, but this is not good.
Yeah, I love Tony. I do love Tony. Like, I don't know what he got in his own head there, really. Like, I think he admitted it, didn't he? He was trying to kind of second guess himself, probably after like other critiques by Army about not following style or whatever. And yeah, like the there was not enough. It didn't have enough. Well, as they said in the critique, it wasn't kind of big enough to be readable. It didn't really use negative space in a very coherent way. It was a bit flat, but not flat in an interesting way. Like, you could use flatness quite deliberately in Japanese tattooing as well as in traditional American tattooing. And yeah, he didn't. I was really disappointed with that, actually.
And then if you've noticed, there is a bit of an elephant in the room. It's because we have to talk about Katie's dragon tattoo. Where do we start?
Well, I'd be interested to hear what you think about this.
So I was reminded so much of like 90s and 2000s Japanese revivalism, but also, funnily enough, Grime, the new school artist, like kind of like that, like kind of nuclear toxic green, the like on composition week, whether you want to call it composition week or not. It was just like a head with the body and the arm. It felt like it didn't feel confident enough, but I think she emphasized the wrong elements in it, and it flowed weird.
I thought though, as a kind of from a distance, I mean, it was massive. I was like, why? I don't understand the choices these artists are making in terms of size a lot of the time, because she did essentially a kind of not a half sleeve really, but like a big chunky like bicep tattoo. It was very big, and you're not giving yourself a lot of time. I thought, really weirdly, probably as a readable tattoo from a distance, hers was probably the best, because it looked like a big freaking awesome dragon. And then not Japanese at all in terms of its composition, funnily enough. As Army pointed out, hard to read because of the way that she'd layered the head and the body in 3 dimensions in a way that didn't really make the body work. And yeah, like, definitely read more like a kind of graphic like skateboard deck from the early 2000s rather than a tattoo. But that's kind of this kind of stuff she does. And I think I agree with the judges' critiques, and particularly when you got up close, you saw sort of how quickly it was done. But yeah, like, I think actually weirdly it was a better tattoo than I think the criticisms gave it, but while still I think the criticisms were fair. So here's something that Gavin said. So as I said, last week when he came over, we watched The Tattoo of Us, which is that show on MTV, where pretty good tattoo artists, I have to say, give people horrible tattoos. And by horrible, it's generally horrible in terms of subject matter. It's like jokes. I mean, it's horrible, like jokes made by their friends. But Gavin said to me after watching Ink Master that he thought that Ink Master was more unethical than The Tattoo of Us, because at least with The Tattoo of Us, there's a kind of like they know they're going to get something silly, or they trust their friend. The tattoos in general on that show, some of the artists on that show are stellar good. I mean, I'm annoyed that they put their talents to such horrible use, but like, those tattoos generally are quite well done. As we've said in previous weeks, and this is what really upset Gavin, and I think he was talking particularly about Katie's tattoo when he mentioned this, actually, which is why I mentioned it at this point of our conversation. He was like, yeah, that person's got a bad tattoo now, and the whole format of the show is set up to give people bad tattoos, and that seems and again, we said this in previous weeks, but it was interesting that sort of unbidden, a colleague of mine whose opinion I really respect art historically, he has tattooed himself as well, and he thinks a lot about the ethics of media, like it's one of the things he teaches. So he was really struck by, particularly on that tattoo, you know, which could have been such a good piece if Katie had had a day or 2 days to outline it on one day, shade it on a second day, color it on a third day. You know, like back in my day, young man, like that would have been a 3-session tattoo, even at that size.
And this is, but funnily enough, as we are touching on this at the end of this episode, this is something we're going to talk about a whole lot more next week.
Okay, yeah. So we're a bit behind on the schedule because of my scooter accident. So we're slightly behind, or I'm slightly behind on things. Tom's already seen next week, so and I haven't yet. No spoilers.
So I get to enjoy in real time Matt's pain. But if you could have guessed, Katie goes home. Katie's gone.
What do we think about Creepy? So I think Creepy Jason should have gone home. He was my pick to go home because it was small. It was really, really badly tattooed. Like technically, it was garbage. He was wearing good shoes. Best outfit of the episode, I have to say.
Was he wearing those white boots?
Yeah. He had his white boots on. No. He had yellow boots on in the second part of the episode. So he won my heart footwear wise, but yeah, that crane was, considering it was small, could have been beautiful, solid, clean. Like I think even with the same design, like someone like Tony or certainly Bob would have done a lovely job with that. And with Jason, it was clumsy, rushed. Katie's I thought was a good enough tattoo, although flawed in all the ways that the judges said. I thought Jason hit the brief probably a bit more in terms of doing something that was Japanese, but it was definitely not a good tattoo. And we've seen, again, this is just a thing of reality shows. It's not really an Ink Master criticism, but we've seen in previous weeks that they don't really seem to apply the judging criteria evenly. You know, sometimes it's like you didn't hit the brief, you're going home. Sometimes it's like you hit the brief exactly, but you did a bad tattoo. It's the quality that's sending you home. So I would have, although CJ, as we're calling him now, was close to the brief, I think it was, in my opinion, at least objectively, the worst tattoo on that lineup. No?
Yeah. So, as we're coming to the end of this episode, who do you think is in the front running now to win? We're getting closer and closer to the end now.
We are. I mean, once again, I think we're seeing the stylistic narrowing, which seems like a really undesirable feature of this program. Doesn't happen in other reality shows either, interestingly. You know, you don't end up on Bake Off with all the time the people that are best at bread winning, right? It seems like there's a real the challenges and the judging and the criteria and even the casting of the show are set up to reward a very particular kind of, you know, not even neo-traditional kind of illustrative, you know, tattooing. And I think on that front,
get Paul Hollywood on Ink Master. No,
yeah, as a guest judge.
It's shite. Your line work too thin. You call this Japanese?
That would be real. That would be real Master of Chaos, wouldn't it? Like, I'd respect that. I just bring on. Like, there was also a great subreddit called Kitchen Confidential, which is like one of those, like, you know, behind the scenes subreddits where chefs talk about things that happen to them. And they said they really want to do a reality show, which is more like working in a restaurant, right? Which is where you cook and then the judges are just random members of the public, and like you can be thrown out, you know, like you can be eliminated, you can make the most perfect dish, but like the customer you've got given like hates shellfish, right? Or wants their steak cooked like far more than the chef would feel comfortable cooking it. And because they're like, that's quite real. I can make the most perfect dish, but I can have a dickhead of a customer. And I feel like I'd respect the Dave Navarro, the Master of Chaos, if he did something like that. You know, brought in some random, like my mum, like bring my mum in fucking Ruby Rose. Jesus Christ. So I think, I think we're really looking at one of Bob, Gian, or DJ to win. I think if it's any one of those other, if it's not one of those three, I will be very surprised.
See, I definitely Bob and DJ. I think Gian is showing his artistic flaws at the moment, that he is quite narrow in like every tattoo he's done the past couple of weeks. It's just a Neotrad tattoo with the elements of the challenge. I think if Angel gets a couple of good challenges come her way, I think she could be in the final. Like, she got to the final in the last season, so, you know, I think, yeah, she's made a couple of mistakes and stuff and had some not so great tattoos, but I think if she gets Jason's not going to get to the final. I don't know if Anthony's going to get there, based on knowledge that I have of next week.
Well, I hope not. I hope he doesn't. Because his child is going to starve to death. So I really
think how much
hope
food he could buy you with $250,000.
Well, wasn't that the calculation of why he stayed in the program?
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you very much for listening. I have been Tom, joined by Matt. This is Beneath the Skin. If you enjoy the show and you want to hear more, you can check us out on Patreon. We have bonus episodes. You can get episodes early. And if you subscribe for as little as £5 a month, you get all that. If you subscribe at £15 a month, you can get Matt's signed book, Painted People, sent directly to you. And you get to help out with the show. You can find us online at Beneath Skin Pod on Twitter. And, you know, if you don't necessarily have the spare cash, I know everyone's kind of going through it right now, to support the show financially, leave us a review or share an episode with one of your friends. You know, who knows, people might like our diatribes about the tattooed invisible man. But from me, Tom, thank you very much. Matt, where can people find you? Obviously, we've plugged the book multiple times.
Yeah, buy the book for more about Japanese tattooing, the history of Japanese tattooing as it relates to Europe and America, amongst other things. I am at Matt Lodder on Twitter, at Matt Lodder on Instagram, Semaphore, Flugelhorn, Yodeling, Didgeridoo, any kind of long distance communication device, scream and I will come a-running.
And if you say tattooing is now more acceptable than ever 3 times in the mirror at midnight, Matt will appear. Stay tuned next week for our Halloween special. Talk to you soon. Bye.